morning everybody, and welcome to Rose's Cafe. Early in my travels to the Philippines, Rose introduced me to a classic Filipino yeast bread. It was so light and fluffy and delicate, slightly sweet, the perfect accompaniment to almost anything you'd like to eat it with. I found out that bread was called pandesal. Pandesal means salt cake in Spanish, literally. And it was introduced to the Philippines by the Spanish in the 16th century. About the same time they introduced similar breads to other Spanish-held territories around the world. The Filipinos have taken pandesal and made it their own. I haven't been able to find any bread in the grocery stores in the United States exactly like it, so we have put together a recipe here to try and make our own. So today I'm going to make pandesal and a couple of accompaniments that you might like to have with it. First, we need to go ahead and get started on the dough because we're going to have a couple of risings that will be time consuming, so it will be a while before the dough is ready to bake into the bread. So without further ado, let's get the ingredients together. The ingredients are really pretty straightforward. 2 cups of warm water, 2 packages of dry active baker's yeast, 2/3 of a cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 6 cups of all-purpose flour, and I've left a measuring cup in there for a reason, and you'll see why in a little while. First, in a small bowl, we're going to combine the 2 cups of warm water, not hot, just kind of typically warm. We're going to add to that the 2 packages of baker's yeast. And 1 teaspoon of the sugar. And mix that around a little bit. Now we're going to set that aside for about 10 minutes while the yeast activates. Now our yeast is ready, so it's time to proceed. So we're going to get a very large bowl and we're going to mix the rest of the sugar and the vegetable oil. And we want to mix that until it's blended smoothly. Once the oil and sugar are blended, we're going to add the salt, 1 cup of flour from the 6 cups we have set aside, and the yeast mixture. Now, got my spoon ready. We're going to blend that until it's well mixed. Now we're going to continue to add the flour about 1/2 cup at a time. Mix it well until the dough pulls away from the sides of the bowl. When the dough reaches a certain thickness, you're going to want to just dive in there with your hands. Be sure you wash them first to get everything well mixed. Once the dough is well blended and it pulls away from the side of the container, you want to turn it out onto a lightly floured flat surface. And we're going to knead the dough for about 10 minutes until it gets nice and elastic. This kneading process produces gluten, which is the stuff that gives yeast breads its nice springy texture. To effectively knead the dough, you want to fold it over on itself, push it out with the hills of your hands like that. If your hands are lightly floured, it'll keep the dough from sticking so much. This is great exercise. This could be almost an aerobic endeavor here. Burn off all those calories you're going to pick up when you eat this stuff later. So see, eating high-calorie treats doesn't count if you cooked it yourself. Okay, I've been kneading the dough for about 10 minutes now. So now I'm going to take another large mixing bowl and I'm going to coat it with vegetable oil spray. And you can use regular oil or butter here if you want to. We're going to put the dough inside of that, and we're going to spray some more butter, some more vegetable oil spray on top of the dough. We're going to cover all that with a damp cloth, and we're going to wait for the dough to rise and double in volume. That'll take about an hour while it's sitting here in a nice warm place. It's been around an hour or an hour and a half now, and as you can see, our dough definitely has doubled in size. And I've made preparations for the next steps. Again, a lightly floured cooking surface, some utensils to cut the dough, and you'll see that in a minute, and finally some breadcrumbs in which to roll the dough before I place it in the baking sheets here. So we're going to punch down the dough, and we're going to turn it out on our lightly floured surface. We're going to knead it just a little bit more, and when we get the dough nice and smooth and elastic, we want to divide it more or less in 3 pieces. Each of the 3 pieces need to be rolled out into a log shape. Keep working it out until you get it to be about an inch in diameter. Once you have the log rolled out, you want to cut it into 1-inch pieces with a sharp knife. Lightly coat those pieces in some breadcrumbs, and then place it on a baking sheet. Now once you get your pan de sal into the pan, you're going to once again cover it with a damp cloth, and we're going to let that rise a second time until it doubles in size, and it should take about a half hour or so. Well, okay then, we've finally gotten all of our dough prepared and in the pans, and now we're going to let it rise for about 30 minutes. Looks like we're going to get about 4 dozen rolls out of this batch. You remember earlier I said that pan de sal goes with just about anything. Well, those crafty Filipinos have taken it a step further, and they have stuffed pan de sal with just about anything. The last time I was in the Philippines, we went into Starbucks in Makati to get a cup of coffee, when I noticed sitting there right beside the bread muffins and all those other pastries you see at Starbucks was pan de sal. Pan de sal stuffed with corned beef, pan de sal stuffed with tuna, pan de sal stuffed with chicken. Now I really like corned beef, and corned beef is quite popular in the Philippines. So we're going to attempt to make some of these into corned beef stuffed pan de sal. So if we're going to do that, we're going to need to make the stuffing. And to make the stuffing, you're going to need to get about half an onion chopped, a few cloves of garlic minced, and of course 1 can of corned beef. And fire up your trustworthy wok. You do have one by now, don't you? And heat up a few tablespoons of vegetable oil. And we'll start off by sauteing the onion and the garlic first in the hot oil until the onions translucent and aromatic. Now the onions and garlic are coming along nicely, so we'll add the corned beef. And we want to break this up, saute it, and homogenize it in with the onion. Okay, that was some hard work, but we're done, I think. So we're going to turn off the heat, and we're just going to set this aside till the rolls finish rising and we're ready for this. Now our rolls have been rising for about an hour now, and they're roughly double in size. So we're going to go ahead and pop them in the oven at 375 for 20 minutes. Now while those are baking, we're going to try making some corned beef filled pandesal with some of the others. Now for this endeavor, I'll start with the same lightly floured surface, and I'm going to take one of the rolls, and instead of baking it directly, I'm going to roll it out. When you get it rolled out to a diameter of about 5 or 6 inches, you want to take a tablespoon of your corned beef mixture, put it in the center, and we're going to fold it up sort of like this, a little bit like making a dumpling. Squeeze it a little bit to seal it. We're going to put it right back on the pan where it came from. Okay, so I stopped the baking time at 12 minutes rather than 20. I think it's because if you follow the dimensions in this recipe, the pandesal you make turns out to be a little bit small. And as you can see, they are a little bit small, but they otherwise look very much like the pandesal I'm familiar with. We'll let these cool off a little bit and see what they taste like. In the meantime, while waiting for the first batch to bake, I finished the stuffed pandesal. And I got about a dozen of them waiting to bake, and also about a dozen more of the plain pandesal. An interesting side note, if you were to steam these right now rather than bake them, you would come up with something that would pass for chappal, which is the subject of another of my posts. So with our adjusted baking time, we're going to put these guys in the oven and let them bake for about 12 minutes. And now comes the moment of truth. Let's check these guys out. Okay, looks okay. Not bad. Not bad at all. A little bit small, but other than that, pretty authentic. Excuse me, let's try it with a little bit of our sauteed corned beef here. Not bad. Not bad at all. So there's the fruits of my labor. Plain pandesal with a little butter, a little jelly. Stuffed pandesal with, in this case, corned beef. And I might point out that this jelly is the jalapeno pepper jelly that we made yesterday. It is just starting to set up well, and it tastes delicious. With all this baking going on this morning, I'm sort of hungry, and if you'll excuse me, it's past my lunchtime. We'll see you next time at Rose's Cafe. Thanks for stopping in.